Someone is lying to you right now. Not a stranger, not a politician on a screen, someone close to you, someone you probably trust. And the reason you haven't caught it yet has nothing to do with intelligence. It's because you've been trained by movies, by instinct, by every lie detection myth ever repeated to look for the wrong things. You look for the eyes, for the fidgeting, for the nervous energy, and every time you do, a skilled liar walks right past you, calm, steady, looking you directly in the face. Because here's what the science actually shows. The real signals aren't in the body. They're in the language, in the gaps between words, in what someone chooses not to say, in the tiny involuntary places where the brain, working overtime to keep the lie alive, starts to crack. Those cracks are invisible if you don't know what you're looking for. But once you do, you will never hear someone talk the same way again. Today, I'm going to show you 5 of them. Stay until the end, because the 5th one is the one that will change the most conversations you've ever had. Way 1. They vanish from their own story. When you tell a true story, you are in it. I went there. I said that. I decided. You're the main character because you were actually there. But ask someone who is lying about the same event and listen carefully. Suddenly, they're nowhere. The story has people in it, situations in it, context in it, but they have quietly stepped out of the frame. You know how people are. That kind of thing happens. Anyone would have done the same. They're narrating a story they were never actually part of. Researchers call this psychological distancing. When the brain fabricates an event, it unconsciously increases the linguistic space between the speaker and the lie. Fewer I statements, more third person, more passive voice. It's not deliberate. The liar isn't thinking, I should stop saying I. Their brain does it automatically, trying to create deniability at a subconscious level. The further they stand from the story and language, the less ownership they appear to claim over something that never happened. Someone lying about where they spent the evening. You know how it is. Things run late, plans change, it happens to everyone. Someone telling the truth about the exact same evening. I stayed at work until 8, then stopped at the shop on the way home. I even have the receipt if you want to see it. One is a documentary narrated from a distance. The other is a lived experience owned by the person living it. Truth tellers don't think about how to tell the story. They just tell it, and they're in it. Here is the essential caveat, and it matters enormously. Some people speak in the third person naturally. Neurodivergent people, anxious people, people from certain cultural backgrounds may default to less self-referential language. This is not a standalone lie detector. It's a departure signal. When someone who normally speaks in confident first person suddenly narrates their own life like a stranger describing someone else's, that shift is what you're listening for. Not the language, the change in the language.
Way number 2. Their story has no rough edges. Real memories are messy. They have tangents, corrections, gaps. Wait, it was Monday, not Tuesday. Actually, hold on, the coffee place was on the left, I think. Or the right. Anyway, the point is, that mess is not a problem. That mess is evidence. Because memory doesn't replay like a video. It reconstructs every single time slightly differently. So when someone tells you a flawless story, perfectly linear, perfectly timed, every detail landing on cue with no corrections and no wandering, what you are hearing is not a good memory. You are hearing a rehearsed performance. Criteria-based content analysis, used by forensic psychologists to assess statement credibility, identifies detail richness as one of the strongest markers of a truthful account. Truth tellers produce messy, peripheral, sensory-specific details because genuine memory is reconstructive. A fabricated account is built to be believed, so it's stripped of anything that could be questioned. Liars keep it simple because every unnecessary detail is a potential contradiction. The cleaner the story, the more deliberately it was constructed. Ask someone truthful where they were last Saturday. I was at my sister's. We had dinner. It was the one she makes with the pasta. We ended up watching something neither of us had seen. I drove home around 9:30. There was actually no traffic, which was weird for a Saturday. Ask someone lying, I was at my sister's for dinner. Same destination, completely different texture. One is a lived Saturday, the other is a fact. Now, the most powerful tool in your arsenal. Ask one specific follow-up question. What did you watch? Watch what happens. Truth expands. A lie either pauses, deflects, or suddenly remembers something generic. The follow-up question is the most underrated lie detection tool that exists, and it costs you nothing. Not an accusation, not a trap, just genuine curiosity. Truth tellers love being asked more because real experiences have more to offer. Liars hate it because follow-up questions require improvisation outside the rehearsed script, in real time, under pressure. You don't have to confront anyone. One curious question delivered warmly will tell you everything. Their relation to the question is the answer. Way number 3. They answer the question they're afraid of. You ask a simple, neutral question, and what comes back is an answer plus a defense of something you never accused them of. Where were you last night? And they say, I was at Jamie's. I had my phone on silent because we were watching something. I always do that when I'm there. I'm not the kind of person who disappears without telling people. Stop. You didn't ask about the phone. You didn't suggest they disappear. You didn't imply anything about their character. They just volunteered 3 pieces of exculpatory evidence for a crime you never brought up. That is not normal. That is a confession in disguise. Psychologists call this deceptive volunteering, a cognitive leak. When the brain is simultaneously managing a lie and anticipating detection, those 2 processes sometimes collide in speech. The result? The liar answers the subtext they fear rather than the question they received. Truth tellers don't pre-defend. The accusation hasn't occurred to them because they know they didn't do anything wrong. Guilt keeps a running list of everything that could be discovered, and sometimes that list speaks before it's asked to. How did the meeting go? It went well. I was completely professional. I didn't say anything inappropriate. I kept everything totally above board. You asked how it went, not whether they were professional. Did you speak to her? Barely, like 2 sentences. I'm not interested in her like that at all. It was purely work-related. You asked if they spoke, not whether they were interested. The information volunteered always addresses the exact thing they're afraid you think. They are not answering your question. They are answering the subtext they fear, and that accusation is usually the truth. Here's the most uncomfortable part of this one. You have done this. Almost certainly. Deceptive volunteering isn't exclusive to dedicated liars. It surfaces whenever anyone carries guilt about anything. Even small things, even things you feel guilty about but didn't technically lie about. The guilt generates the preemptive defense regardless of the size of the secret, which means the next time you catch yourself offering information nobody asked for, your brain is telling you something, and it's usually worth listening to.
Way number 4. The story gets better every time they tell it. Real memories don't improve. They fade, they blur at the edges, they lose details over time. That is what memory does. It degrades naturally, and nobody blames you for it. But a lie does the opposite. Every time it gets told, it becomes more detailed, more airtight, more conveniently complete. Because a lie is not a memory, it's a construction under active maintenance, and with each retelling, the builder spots the gaps and fills them. The story that comes out 3 weeks later is smoother, richer, and more defensible than the story from 3 weeks ago. And that direction of travel, stories getting better instead of worse, is one of the clearest signals that something was built rather than lived. Fabricating a consistent account across multiple tellings places enormous cognitive load on the brain. To manage this, liars develop 2 characteristic patterns. First, they overstabilize the parts of the story that feel dangerous, making those details suspiciously fixed while everything else shifts. Second, they add new context in later tellings to retroactively patch holes exposed by earlier questioning. Real stories lose peripheral detail over time. Fabricated stories gain it. The lie improves because it has to. Truth doesn't need upgrades. First telling, we just grabbed a coffee. It was quick, nothing important. Second telling, 2 days later, I coffeed, I mentioned it at the time, it lasted maybe 20 minutes, it was completely casual. You don't remember them mentioning it. Third telling, a week later, I told you about this when it happened, you just weren't listening properly. It was the Tuesday, I even remember what I ordered. The coffee now has a time, a day, and a witness receipt for why you don't know about it. Every version patches a vulnerability in the last one. A true story doesn't need retrofitting. Only a lie requires constant renovation. The most revealing version of a lie is almost always the first one, before the teller knows which parts need defending. Every follow-up question you ask is a gift to the liar. It shows them exactly what to reinforce. This is why skilled investigators get the full initial account before asking a single question. Let them build the whole story first, then read the architecture. The first unprompted version is the most honest map of what actually happened, because it's the least defended one. Way number 5. Angry at the question, not the accusation. You ask something, carefully, not aggressively, just a question, and instead of an answer, you get a storm, immediate, disproportionate fury, not at what you implied, but at the fact that you asked it at all. And here is what nobody tells you. That anger is not evidence that you were wrong to ask. That anger is evidence that the question landed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Because innocent people and guilty people experience the same question completely differently. And the difference between their reactions is one of the clearest windows into the truth that exists. Research on deception and emotional response documents a consistent and striking pattern. Genuinely innocent people, when questioned about something they didn't do, experience surprise first, then hurt, then a sustained, evidence-driven desire to clear their name. Their emotional goal is resolution. Guilty people display something fundamentally different, immediate anger directed not at the accusation, but at the questioner, at you for asking. The anger serves two functions simultaneously. It releases the guilt that's been building internally, and it applies social pressure designed to make you retract the question, make you feel bad for asking, make the conversation stop. Innocent person asked something they genuinely didn't do. What? No. Where is that coming from? Walk me through what you think happened because I want to understand this. They address the substance. They want the record corrected. They engage with the question because the question has a good answer. Guilty person, same question. I can't believe you're asking me that. After everything. This is exactly your problem. You always assume the worst. You've never trusted me. This says everything about you. They didn't answer the question. They put you on trial for asking it. Because answering the question, actually engaging with the substance of what was asked, is the one thing they cannot safely do. Innocent people want the accusation disproved. Guilty people want the conversation ended. That is the whole distinction. Everything else is noise. When someone reacts to a reasonable question with anger aimed at you rather than an answer aimed at the truth, they are not angry that you asked. They are angry that you asked something they cannot answer. And that inability, that specific, cornered, furious silence where an answer should be, is the most honest thing they will say to you.
5 ways. And I promised you at the start that the 5th one would change things. I hope it did. But here is what I need you to take away from all of this, because it matters more than any single sign I showed you today. None of these work in isolation. One signal is not a verdict. One odd answer is not a confession. What you are building, slowly, with practice, is the ability to read a person's baseline. How does this specific person normally tell stories? How do they normally react when questions are innocent? What does their language look like when they have nothing to hide?
Because here is the truth about lie detection that most people never hear. The average person can identify a lie with about 54% accuracy. That's barely better than a coin flip. But that statistic applies to strangers. People who know their subject deeply, who have a rich baseline to compare against, do significantly better. Not because they have a secret method, because they know what normal looks like for that person. And when something stops being normal, they notice. So pay attention to people when nothing is at stake, when there's no pressure, no conflict, no reason to lie. That is when you are building the most valuable tool in this entire video. Not the 5 ways, the baseline. Because when the baseline shifts, your gut will tell you before your logic does. The skill is not learning to catch liars. It's learning to trust yourself when something stops feeling right. You've always had that. You just haven't always had permission to act on it. Now you do. Which of the 5 ways hit you hardest? Comment below, or tell me about the one moment in your life where you wish you'd known this. I read every single comment on this channel, and if there is someone in your life who needs to watch this, share it with them. Sometimes the most important thing you can give someone is a name for what they've been sensing. Subscribe for more. New video every week. I'll see you in the next one.